guys, Serena here. Thanks for joining me today on my YouTube channel. Today I have a few announcements to make. First of all, I do have a new job and I'm going to be focusing on that since YouTube doesn't pay the bills. So I'll put my art aside for a while. This is going to be my last video for a while, and I may make some videos again as things pick up and I get in the groove of the job and so forth. But just to let you know, I'm going to be focusing on that for a while. So now I have done a lot of unboxings and I've built up my studio, and the pandemic did allow me more time for art, which was good, but I still don't have a studio space, and that really holds me back. Everything is in boxes and bins and drawers. I hope none of you have that situation. If you do, give me a shout out down below and leave me a comment. Tell me what your situation is. But it leaves me very, very frustrated. And I've been thinking about this more and more. I want to give a shout out to a YouTube creator who I watch. Her name, or her channel name, it's Cyndia Art. And I'll give you a link to her site because she has some really nice general creative art tips, and she uses a lot of different media, which I really like. But she made a mention in one of her videos, and it was so impressive to me, I wrote it down in my journal. So Cyndia said something to this effect, and I apologize to her if I don't quote it directly, but I wrote it in my journal because it impressed me so. And she said, creating a studio space is going to make the biggest difference in your practice. And I've been thinking and thinking about this for a long time, and very frustrated because I don't have a space. I keep having to set up and break down and set up and break down, and it's not very conducive to art. So if any of you out there are going through the same thing, try to get yourself a studio space, even like they say a closet or a corner of a room, which I don't even have. Try to do it because it really makes a difference. But for today's video, I did want to let you all know that I did something different as a result of watching her video. And I took a list of all my art supplies. It's a long list, but it's things I've had from years ago and things I just bought. And I guess I've collected a few too many art supplies to try someday. Any of you have that problem where, oh, I'll get to this someday, oh, this would be nice for this project, and you kind of put it aside and you don't get to it. But I made the list, and what I'm trying to do, I've vowed to try all my supplies at least once. I have wood panels I'd like to try with oils. I have a small box of Conte crayons, which include sepia and sanguine. I love those brownish neutral colors, and I wanted to draw a couple of things with that. I have some handmade paper that I'd like to use specifically for that. But again, it's put aside. I haven't gotten to it. But today, I pulled out something, and this is shell paper that I got from Jerry's Artorama, and it's something I had bought and put aside thinking, wow, this sounds really interesting, it would be fun to work with. I'll kind of read it to you. I did get a multi-pack. It's a 10 by 12 inch H sheet. It's got 4 sheets of natural, 2 sheets of light reddish brown, and 2 sheets of warm gray. I don't think they have this same selection where you can get like a mix, but you can buy individual sheets and they're much larger. But it's a different kind of paper. I'll kind of read it to you real quick. It says all colors are made using organic pigments. Lustrous surface is semi-absorbent. It is an acid-free, handmade of natural plant fibers from Nepal. It's strong and lightweight, coated with an emulsion made with seashell powder. So it's a type of rice paper that has a coating on top. Lustrous surface is semi-absorbent. The unique characteristics of this paper opens up many new exciting creative avenues, works well with most art media including watercolor and fluid acrylic. we'll have to see about that. I'm going to try a watercolor today, but we'll see. It looks very, very thin for that. We'll see how it works. Used extensively for block printing, screen printing, and monotype printing. Great for pen and ink, marker, crayon, pastel, charcoal, stamping, and collage. So, and it tells you it's available in many different colors. What I did was, now I just have this pad here down to keep an awful glare I'm getting from the light. It's really dark today, and in fact it's raining outside now. I just want to check and make sure my this pad is covering up the glare. Okay, so we're good to go. There is a little bit of glare from the wrapper on here, but we'll get around that, so I'm sorry for that. Now what I did was, I'll kind of open this up and show you what's inside, since you may as well see what it comes with. Of course, this is very fine. Of course, it has a one of those silica gel things. Don't eat this. Here's the neutral pages. Okay, they're very thin. They're quite thin. It is a rice paper, so it would be thin, but you can see it's got like a texture to it, and it is kind of let's call it maybe iridescent. It's got a little shine to it. But look at those nice lines through it. Look at that nice texture it already comes with. So I thought that was a little bit intriguing. And these are kind of neutral colors that it comes with. That's the light brownish, I guess, or light red. And this is the gray, what they call a gray. This is the neutral one. I did see it demonstrated online. And what they did was they took foam core board, I believe, and some spray stick, and they sprayed the I forget what the spray adhesive is called, but they sprayed that on there, and they pressed it on so that the paper had a backing to it. Now, if it's meant to use with a backing, they should really sell it that way, but what I've done is, just for simplification, I drew a little sunflower here for fun. I'll do it in watercolors. I did already crease that, thinking I was just going to use a half a page, but I drew the sunflower a little bit larger than I wanted to, and it kind of went over the edge, but that's okay. This is for demonstration only. What I'm going to do is get some washi tape and tape this down. Now, I don't normally use washi tape. It's a little bit expensive for me, but I know people use it because it doesn't mar the paper. It doesn't pull up the paper fibers. So I will go ahead and use it for that reason, because I don't want to ruin the paper now that I've got it. And I could see this being a nice little thing to frame later on. But let me go ahead and get this on here so it doesn't really slip around on me too much. I'm not so worried about the background. It's okay if I go over the edges a little bit. Now I'm trying to use things that I already have that I don't use a lot of, and my ceramic palette that I've gotten months ago, I have used it, as you see, but I don't use it often because I don't have a place to leave it. I have to keep tucking it away in a drawer, but I'm taking it out today and treating myself because I really do love the way the paints mix on there. I love the feel of it. And I'll be using probably not my larger quill brush, which I love from Jackson's, but I have a couple other ones. I have a 2 and a 4 from Jackson's that I'm using constantly. I love these. Really nice. They're synthetic, and they do the job. I'll also be using my Schmincke palettes, which I have. I started with 24 colors, and I kind of added and added and added, and it's spilled into 2 palettes. So I've got 2 palettes. It's shameful, but I use them a lot. I like them, and it brings me joy. I think if you have something that really brings you joy, you can't worry too much about the initial expense, especially if it's something like this that will last a long time, and I expect it to. So I'm going to use my Schmincke colors there. These are I kind of divided them into 2 sections. Those sections there, and then I have another one for more neutral colors. This spilled into the second palette, and those are more neutral colors. The greens did spill over too, but some really nice colors there in the selection. that I've chosen and added to. So we'll start with that, and I'll mix up some colors, and we'll see what happens. But first I want to go ahead and finish drawing this. I have a Zig Millennium pen by Kuretake. It's an 03, and I want to just go ahead and see if I can, a little hard for me to see in the lighting here. In fact, I tried to draw most of this, and as I got down to here, my pen died. I'm hoping it's not because of the emulsion on the paper here. That was one concern for me, because it does have, I guess, crushed shells. That's what gives it that kind of iridescent glow. So this is an older pen. It's ready to go. I know it's running out of ink anyway, so I'm not going to blame it on the paper itself, but we'll see. I've only got this little bit left to do. Oh, I think I went too far. I'm trying to follow the tracing I made with graphite. But let's get started on the painting. I'm really curious as to see how this handles with watercolor. It says watercolor. It does say it. It says it right on the label. Look at the label again. So we didn't imagine it. It says, works well with most art media, including watercolor and fluid acrylic. So we're going to try it. I'm going to keep my watercolors a little bit on the dry side so that I don't have an issue with it being too wet. And, you know, it's not really something that is probably made for wet and wet, but let's get going. Alright, so I'm starting with my chromium yellow, deep hue, and cadmium yellow light. I think those will be very nice colors for the sunflower here. And I'm going to test it first. I have a test sheet. See how the color looks. It's a little bit bright, but sunflowers are bright. And on this kind of a paper, I don't really want to go too... I don't want to go too watery. Let's see how that looks. I'm feeling a little bit of resistance. Need a little bit more water on there, a little bit more paint. It almost wants to resist the paint. We're going to see how this works. I'm going to have to, I see I can need to skip some as I go along. It's not wanting to, seeing I'm having to use a lot of paint, it's not wanting to hold the paint on the surface. It's not really absorbing it, but it's not taking it very well. Although I'm surprised it's not really crinkling up there. See how it's kind of... Because of the texture, you have to kind of get it in all the little cracks. I don't really want to... Oops, I went over the line. Ah! That's what you get for trying to do it like lefty, kind of. Well, I am surprised I'm not really seeing a lot of buckling. Maybe I shouldn't say that right off the bat. And really, I didn't tape this paper down, so that's something good to say about it. You know, watercolor paper, if you don't have a very thick paper, if you've got a paper on the thinner side, thinner than 140 pound, you're going to have some problems with buckling and wrinkling. Now, I just drew this in with pen ahead of time just so I could see what I was doing. I'm glad I did on a day like this because it's just very, very dark and gloomy. You live in a northern climate in the U.S., it just, you get those months where you don't get much sun at all, and it's just terrible, but it is the way it is. See if I can get some more paint on there. And I'm kind of mixing these together a little bit. I'm curious as to how this is going to dry. You know, when you use watercolor, you usually will let the paint dry and go back and do more layers. So I'm curious as to how that is going to pan out. I suppose I'm skipping every other one here. I suppose I don't really have to do that. I don't, really have to worry about them running into each other as far as the colors. They're pretty much all the same, although I'm adding a little more of the cadmium yellow hue to some of this, so that they're not all the same exact color. That would make for like a boring picture. Now, I'm afraid to touch that. It's damp. Alright, so fortunately I picked a subject that's really not going to bleed. I can't see using this for wet and wet techniques. It's not for that. It is definitely for a technique where you will use more of a dry brush. Although, as I said, I have to wet it a certain amount because it's not going to take if I don't. There are a lot of ridges on it, so that might not be something you like. I also have a concern about brush wear, because I feel quite a bit of dragging. There's quite a bit of dragging on this as I'm running my brush across. Just as I got new brushes, now I'm going to ruin it, right? Hopefully not. But I wanted to try this. I actually bought this years ago, and I don't know what possessed me to do it. I don't know what project I was thinking about specifically, or even if I was. I forgot to make a little detail there, which I can do now. There we go. Just kind of make the petal attached to something, not make it like lying in the air there. The color is coming out a little bit lighter than I had hoped, but you know what, with sunflowers you can cheat a little. That's what's good. I do like the different texture. I've always had a thing for papers. Ask my daughter if you get me into one of these hobby stores or something and they have a paper section, I'm there, and she can't get me out. I don't know what it is. I just like different textures of paper, different colors of paper, although I tend toward the neutrals and the light colors so that I can actually draw or paint on them. I'm not too much of a paper crafter or paper artist. I haven't really gotten into that. So the darker colors I kind of shy away from. But we'll do this for now and see how this turns out. Oop, that was a different color. I wasn't ready to use that one yet. A little darker color. I'm curious as to how this is going to look once it's dry and I draw some lines in it and do a little bit of shading. I don't think you can really do the kind of shading that you would normally do, and let's test it out, that you would normally do with a wet and wet technique. That's a little bit of a darker, not quite dark enough, but I don't want to add a lot of water to this. Right now I just want to let it sit. I'll give the stem a preliminary coloring, and we'll go back to that later while this dries. That is, I already have some color on my palette, so I'm going to use that, and I try to do that whenever I can. I try to use colors that I already have mixed. I don't want to waste any of it, so I don't really clean my palette when I'm done. It's more a matter of using what I have and making do, especially since these are very expensive paints. The Schmincke, it's well worth every penny, but again, you have to watch what you're spending, especially if you're on any kind of budget. Still looks bright. It always looks muddier on the palette than it does on your actual subject. Now, the one thing about this is I'm going against the grain. If you can see, the grain goes sideways, and I definitely can feel that on my brush. But I don't see a lot of like bleeding, feathering. I don't see a lot of feathering there. Now, of course, I'm working without a reference, which is a no-no for me because I have a terrible imagination when it comes to shading, and I just don't know what I don't know what's going to be dark and what's going to be light and what's going to reflect. Well, I don't know what happened right there. My memory card died. It was full, so I had to go ahead and erase some things, and now I can't find my brush. There it is. It's always a disaster, isn't it? But I wanted to go ahead and put in a few little details on this, some darker colors, and work that in to the yellow. So let's take a look and see if we can get some little lines in there. Let me see if this will work for a color for us. A little darker maybe. Again, it's really hard to judge what your colors are sometimes in the palette because you really need those test strips. And I'm just going to go ahead and put some lines in here. I should have a finer brush. Too lazy to go get one, of course. Now I'm a little pressed for time, actually, so I'm not going to do it, but you get the idea. I just want to give it a little bit of a texture here. I also don't know how much time I bought with the erasures I did on my memory card there. So I'm just going to move along here fine, quickly. Try to get a little bit of detail in. Trying to follow the shape of the leaf as closely as I can while keeping the brush upright. Have you ever seen a sunflower? You know, they do have those fine folds in them. Adding a little shade on some of the leaves would help too, which I'll kind of do in a bit. I'm just kind of in a hurry, which I shouldn't be. You shouldn't really do that. You're not really learning very much if you're in a hurry and just kind of zipping along. But I'm also experimenting, so we'll call it experimentation. How's that? And we're almost done with that. I do have to get the center here, which was quite dark, but let me get some kind of a color do I want to add to that to make a shadow. Not quite so much red, a little more blue, I think. Okay. Figure the sun's coming from that direction. We'll get that a little shady. And that's going to be shady because it's behind the other. Oops. That's going to be shady. Of course, if I want it really shady and want it to look realistic, I should actually have mixed that. Since this is yellow, I should actually have mixed it with a little purple. Because that gives it that little bit of contrast is what you're looking for. Looking for contrast. But I'm just doing this very quickly. I'm not hanging it up anywhere. It's just going to be, see how adding just that little bit, of course if I had the better color, the right color, it would look so much better. But just adding that little bit of shade there is making a big difference. It's adding a lot of depth to it. And that's the thing with watercolors, which I like so much. It's a matter of layers. You know, a lot of artists say that if you're not getting the look you're looking for, if you're looking for realism, if you're not getting it, a lot of times it's because you're stopping too soon. Keep going. If you think you should add more shade to it, go for another layer. Put another layer in there. Of course, with watercolor, once you go too far, you've gone too far. You really can't undo it. But you know what? I don't want to go too far on this because I want to just wrap it up here. It's mainly to take a look at what this paper was like. And I'm trying to remember which one is lighter. Is it the outer or the inner? I think it's the inner that's a little lighter. But I'm just going to go ahead and get that. That's quite saturated. You're not going to see any nuances in this. I'm just doing it to get it going here. I should actually have a that's a little saturated. Almost might be using gouache at this point. Let me get that a little watery, a little more watered down. I don't want it quite that. I should use a bigger brush too if I'm using a large space like this. Watch me use a bigger brush and then ruin it. The look, I mean, not the brush. Alright, let's see here. Get that on there. Come on. There we go. And I'll have the center maybe more. I think it's actually the outer ring that's a little blacker than the center. There's like 2 rings on it. In fact, I think it is. It's the outer ring that's blacker. So I'm just going to paint the whole thing. All my careful painting there. And just while I have that going, I am going to try Payne's Gray. See what that's going to do to it. That gives a little more blue. Got to be careful mixing it right on there, but that's giving it a little more. Well, that's brave, mixing it right on the paper, huh? Now I can feel this paper becoming really saturated, and I don't want to mess with it much more as far as that. I'm going to leave it as is, but I just wanted to try this and see how this paper held up. No buckling. Look at that. I am really surprised that there is no buckling. That's really just amazing that there isn't any. I really expected it to buckle. I expected to see some of that just warping because it's so thin. I can see why the demonstrator used a spray mount. It was a spray mount is what he used on foam core board, and he put it against there and just pressed it, and then he worked on it. But I can see how he did that, so that might be helpful to have a little bit of a backing to it. If you're going to do that, I think at that point they should really sell it that way, but my own opinion. So I'm just going to do a little bit more shadow here because I don't think this is dark enough. Just like it a little bit darker, just a little more contrast there. This probably isn't something I would buy again. I was able to get the sample pack at a decent price, so you know, I didn't care that much. It was okay. It wasn't terribly expensive at the time. It has gone up since. I see now it is a little bit more expensive, and I really would be hard pressed to get it unless I really had a specific use for it. If I really needed to, I don't know what you'd use this for specifically. If you do some paper crafts, I could see taking advantage of the texture and the sheen on it. I don't see that it's really adding any sheen. You can see it. You can see the shell finish through the paint. So you can see that. If that's important to you, if you like that texture or that effect, by all means, you know, a different product. But I thought I would review it and let everybody see what it is, because I haven't seen a lot of reviews on there, on YouTube about this. And just a few notes. Be very careful of the brushes that you use. It is very harsh. It's very rough. And you could ruin your brushes and or your pens. But I could definitely see using this with like a Conte crayon, charcoal, and pen and ink would be great. You know, if you use ink like a sumai, is it that right, sumai? The Japanese paintings that they do. Pastels of, you know, I don't know about oil pastels, but definitely chalk pastels. I'm really surprised that there isn't that bleeding. I really am. I expected it to go right in the crevices and follow the crevices. So they put a nice surface on it. Of course, it's on one side. The surface is not on both sides. But listen, for a nice little picture there, once I finish it and I could frame it up, I could see that hanging up and, you know, put it up in a room just as kind of a little accent piece. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I thank you for your time watching it. Give it a thumbs up, like it, and leave me some comments. Let me know what you'd like to see in the future when I do start making videos again. I think I may actually do that. Happy creating to all of you.